Hello, folks. I'm your host, Craig T. Stewart, and I'm here with...
Jeff Mayhew.
And this is another webisode. Webisode? It's another What the Book episode. Hey, Jeff. What's the book this month?
Shadow Puppets.
Sheesh,
Ooh.
you'd think we'd have, the rest of the series read already. We haven't done that yet?
Well, maybe you haven't, but I have.
What happens in the next book?
All right, I haven't really.
I knew it. I knew it. Well, luckily for us, that past Craig did a thing where he summarized the first two books and this one. So let's go to him and see what he had to say. Hello, folks. Craig T. Stewart here, and welcome to another What the Book webisode primer. The book today is Shadow Puppets by Orson Scott Card. It's the third book in the Ender Shadows series. It looks a little something like this. If you haven't read it and like what you hear in this episode, there's a full-length podcast where Jeff and I engage in the themes of the book as well as some events in the book as well, and that's coming in the coming week. Now, what's the book all about? And for those who haven't binged these awesome books, considering how it's the third book in the series, here's a quick summary of the first two books. In Ender's Shadow, Bean is a brilliant but small orphan who navigates the harsh streets of Rotterdam. And he does this before being rescued by Sister Carlotta, who's a mother surrogate for him, into Battle School. At Battle School, where kids are raised to defeat the Formics, Bean's strategic genius is on full display as it rivals Ender's Wiggins. As a crucial member of Ender's team, Bean uncovers secrets about his own genetically modified origins while playing a critical role in the defeat of the Formics. In Shadow of the Hegemon, the story is set back on Earth after the Formic Wars end. Bean emerges as a pivotal figure in a fractured world where Battle School graduates and Peter Wiggin, Ender's older brother, who was rejected by Battle School, are at the center of global political struggles. Bean allies with Petra and navigates political intrigues orchestrated by his arch-nemesis Ashiel, thwarting Ashiel's power grabs by using his intellect, all while confronting his own vulnerabilities and looming threat of his engineered biology. In Shadow Puppets, we pick up where the previous books leave off with Bean and Petra striving to defeat Ashiel's schemes. As nations in the hegemony are teetering on the edge of more wars, Bean's prowess is tested while grappling with his genetically altered condition that causes rapid aging and death. He finds a softer side, marrying Petra and going through his past with her in search of a way to keep his genetic alterations from his future children. Meanwhile, Asia and the hegemony are still being exploited by Ashiel, and Bean and Petra work covertly through relationships and alliances alongside Ally and Peter and many others to keep Ashiel from absolute power. Their personal stakes intensify as Ashiel steals their unborn children. This novel blends high-stakes political intrigue with Bean's personal struggle to secure a future he can be satisfied with, given his limited lifespan. And now, some themes that we'll be bringing up in the full podcast. The first one, obviously, is political intrigue. The second is going to be identity and humanity, especially as it relates to Bean. And the third is survival and sacrifice. What leaders must always take into account when making decisions. So with all that said, stay tuned. I hope you enjoyed this preview. If you're interested but not sold, there's a full-length podcast where I discuss this book with Jeff at length, coming for your binging pleasure on Substack, Spotify, and YouTube. You can find all things What the Book by going to craigtstewart.com. Have a good one, folks.
Man, that past Craig is pretty smart.
were you watching the same episode that I was watching?
Hey, don't be jealous, present Craig.
It. I'm not jealous. I just don't understand why my parents don't see how awesome I am. Or wait, I'm
All right,
Craig,
Peter.
not Peter.
All right,
Wait a
Peter.
second. I'm really confused. Really, really confused. But maybe that's because of how the book started. It starts with Peter Wiggin changing orders to rescue Ashiel, and he doesn't tell Bean, and he sends Surya along to go do this deed. Surya along knows how dangerous Ashiel is. Jeff, how does he handle the situation to save himself?
He doesn't want Ashiel to feel like he's saving Ashiel. He wants Ashiel to feel like he's saving himself. So he tosses a knife into the transport that Ashiel is in and just lets things play out the way that they play out.
That's exactly right. And he does that because anyone that's read the first couple of books, Ashiel has a thing about not being at the mercy of other people. And he takes it personally when you're the one that helps him out. You end up dead eventually. So Surya Along has to figure out how to get around this. And that's what he does. He basically shifts all of the power into Ashiel through sleight of hand in a way.
Yeah, Ashiel doesn't like to be vulnerable. He doesn't like people to see him vulnerable. He basically kills anyone that sees him in a vulnerable state because he has this perception of what he should be, which was shaped, right? It was shaped on his own. He kind of wrote. He was an orphan on the street, and kind of came up with his own perspective of what life should be and how life should be, and he had a hard knock life, as they call it, where he had to fight for every scrap that he had, and he thinks that he's right because he's risen to this level that that lack of guidance at a young age, the ability to overcome all the challenges and then to rise to this level, he thinks that his way is the best way.
Well, we got a little insight into him from the last book, right? We don't get a point of view from him from this book, but we see in the last book where he kind of has, I'm going to call it like a God complex, where he believes the universe will just bend to his will and that it will always provide. And in doing so, he kind of doesn't really plan anything out. He just kind of wings it and uses his natural psychopath empathy to make up a term where he's charming and pleasant and he says all the right things and people believe that he's on their side. Next thing you know, he's stabbing you in the back or getting some power. And he did this in Russia, he did this in India, he did this in China. And it looks like at the beginning of this book, he's going to do it to Peter as well.
Yeah. But what happens? Because Peter, and that's, how I feel about Peter, right? I'm not a big fan of Peter.
He's a great guy.
And he
Never
doesn't,
seen one greater.
He doesn't come off well in this book either. But, and here's the difference between Peter and Ashiel. And there's a great chapter on this in the book, is Peter has parents who love him, despite the fact that he doesn't think he has parents that love him. He thinks he has parents that are antagonistic and disrespectful to him. And he's almost risen to where he is out of spite. But he comes to realize that it's not. He hasn't risen out of spite. He actually has risen out of love. The difference between him and Ashiel is the fact that he is loved. And that love literally saves Peter's life.
Multiple times, at least in this particular book. Yeah, the way I would put it is Peter has people who love him. And it's because he has people that love him that he has people around him that he can that carry out his will, right? So we get some of the parents' perspective in this book as well, John Paul and Teresa Wiggin. His mother is indirectly tasked with killing Achille, for instance. Jean-Paul counterbalances his wife and Peter and their ambitions, and Jean-Paul makes sure that Peter's orders are carried out because it sounds like Peter is a lot like me, where I'll say something ambiguous or have a task that's ambiguous, and it's like, okay, here's your marching orders, go do this thing. And Jean-Paul's like, they don't know what that means. Here, let me do it. And he does that all in the back end because he loves Peter. He wants Peter to succeed.
Yeah.
Achille doesn't have any of that.
Well, and I think the other thing is so part of it is his parents do love him, but they're a little in that circumstance where John Paul is going behind Peter to kind of like tie up the problems that he leaves undone. He's almost enabling Peter, right? As opposed to saying the difficult thing to Peter. And exactly what you just said is like, they don't understand what you said. They don't know what you know, and you're the one in charge, and it's your job to help them know what you know so they can carry out your will. You can't just expect people to bend to your will, as you alluded to with Achille. And this is how Peter survives, is he's got people around him who love him, who are, filling the pieces that he leaves behind. But eventually he gets to a point with his father and his mother where he realizes this is happening, and they are no longer enabling him, but it seems like Peter is ready to take a step forward in his growth from this book. I'd be interested to see where Peter goes in the next series, in the next book or the book after.
Oh, he goes places.
I bet he does. I mean, he meant the space this time. I never thought that would happen.
we know from Ender's Game that he eventually succeeds. Spoilers.
Oh,
we already know
man.
this because the very last piece of, or is it the second to last chapter of Ender's Game, Ender at like age 15 is talking to his brother who's on his deathbed, essentially. So like those exploits are conveyed to Ender. It's not necessarily conveyed to us, probably because Orson Scott Card hadn't written them all out yet. But like it's there. We know that the good guy's going, the quote unquote good guy, right? Peter's going to have a redemption. He's going to achieve a goal in a way that we can go, all right, that's probably the best outcome. We just don't know how it's going to get there. And each book is very, it's refreshing because you know what's going to happen, but you don't know how it's going to get there. The end state is known, but how you get there, it's a mystery. And that's fun. That's the ride.
Well, yeah, life is all about the journey, right? Like we all know we're going to die, right? But we still live anyways, right? Because it's the living that matters. And I think that, this was a pivotal moment for Peter because he didn't just reflect on his relationship with his mother and his father, but he reflected on his relationship with his siblings, specifically Peter, who he very much seems to have resented in Peter's success and becoming the hero. Again, why does Peter rise to greatness? A lot out of spite. A lot out of spite.
Out of spite and to prove himself. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a I'm going to say a counterbalance. What's the better word? It's a balancing act of both, right? It depends on from which emotion he's drawing on. Like a desire to achieve something or to prove himself versus that desire to outdo the other person or to show that other person like who's actually in charge. And that's some of the dynamic that he has with Bean as well. And Bean's kind of plain about it. I'm smarter than you. Get over it. Do what I say or not. You're the one that's the political figure. I don't care. Which is what happens in the first chapter, right? Surial Wong is put in charge of that mission to rescue Achille. Bean and Petra say adios, and they go about their own way. And there's a lot to be said about Bean and Sister Carlotta's relationship in the first and second books. I think Bean having that more emotional person to balance his absolute logical, I'm not a human perspective is very good for him. And it creates a very interesting dynamic that unfolds. First, it was his mother surrogate, right? And now it's someone that he eventually marries later on in this book. More spoilers, because why not?
Well,
And go ahead.
I was going to say is like, I love that part of Bean's character, or that like that question that is asked throughout both Ender Shadow and Shadow Puppets, which is Bean human? He was created in a lab. He doesn't feel like he's human, and he has all these people around him that are saying, "You're absolutely human. I love you, and you are human." Sister Carlotta died for Bean, right? And Petra absolutely loves Bean and is trying to convince Bean that he's human. He's like, look, I'm going to die at 28 probably. I'm growing at an exponential rate. I am not human. I am against God's creation. And I love the chapter with Anton and Petra, and the way that, Petra is able to look at this from a different perspective and say, look, all of these other kids that were supposedly had the same Anton's key as you, they all died. They were all murdered. But somehow you were able to get out, put yourself in the toilet tank, save yourself, and then, live on the street and grow. That's God's hand helping you survive, right? That's God saying you're not against my creation. You're part of my creation. Maybe it's not the same way as everybody else, but it is part of my plan, and you are part of my plan, and you have a purpose, and you have meaning, and you are loved.
Yes.
And then Petra convinces him to have a kid.
Well, there's a lot more to it, and I've actually got 3 things that I wanna cover, because I think all the standout lines that I can think of come from that Anton chapter, and maybe one that's related to it. The first one is like where Bean's like, "I'm not a human. I'm the only one," so on and so forth. And Anton's like, "Listen, I know something of loneliness too, because all of a sudden my work was taken from me." And what he's referring to here is he came up with Anton's key, right? This flip of the gene that has altered Bean irrevocably. And Petra and Bean's concern is their children, their embryos, might have this same key turned, and they want to know, because Bean's adamant, "I'm not going to let my children only live 20 to 28 and be as smart as me, because it's a burden and it's a lonely existence." And so Anton's like, "Listen, I've been there too. I can't talk about my work." And he continues, "From my mind, not just from my daily activities." All of his work is taken away from him. "I could not even think about it, and I quickly discovered my friendships were not transcendent. They were all tied to my work. And when my work went away, so did these friends. They were not unkind. They still inquired after me. They made overtures. But there was nothing to say. Our minds and hearts did not really touch at any point. I discovered that I did not know anybody, and nobody knew me."
That's back to that vulnerable part too. In
Yeah.
order for somebody to know you, you have to allow them to know you. You have to share yourself, both the good and bad, with them.
Well, yeah, I think it touches on something that I think modern society could definitely learn from. And it's like, you can be absorbed in your work, in your life's goal, but if you have no relationships outside of that, do you really have any relationships? Like, I would say all my coworkers are my friends. Like, we talk to one another. There's probably only one person out of all of those, when I decide to move on to a different role, that I'll continue talking to. It's all surface. There's no depth to those relationships. It's all pursuing whatever the end state is for a project or company, right? And this is what Anton's touching on. And for someone like Bean, who's so smart, like, all he does is solve problems and work on things. You're never going to have deep relationships unless you pull back from that. And that's what Petra's pushing him towards, is having a deeper relationship and trying to figure out how to experience that softer side, that more emotional side.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think Bean has grown up in a world that doesn't value that softer side. I mean, he was on the streets of Rotterdam. He was in battle school. Everything in his life is pushing him away from that softer side until he meets Sister Carlotta. That's really the turning point in his life. And then Petra's like the extension of that. She's like fulfilling that, that growth in being to become the man that he was supposed to be, right? Because like you can say I'm a big strong man and I went to battle school and I won all these wars, but are you really a man? Do you really have the strength of wisdom and relationships to extend on yourself once you're gone, which is kind of Petra's point. And kind of Anton's point too is like there is more to life than just your work.
And that leads me to the next point I wanted to make. And this is on page 94 and 95 of my mass market book here. And then Jeff has his not mass market book.
Oh, mine's not the mass market?
No, it might be it, but it's not like the cheapest one that I have because I got the set. So Anton is talking about work and meaning in life, right? And he eventually just says, listen to me, both of you. Here's the meaning of life. For a man to find a woman, for a woman to find a man, the creature most unlike you, and then to make babies with her, with him, or to find some other way to get them. But then raise them up and watch them do the same thing, generation after generation, so that when you die, you know you are permanently a part of a greater web of life. And this is at the same point where he mentions like, hey, I'm getting married. I can't do the work that I want to do, but I can experience this thing that I've never experienced, and that's marriage.
I had that mark too. That was
Of
one of
course
the
you
best.
did.
That was one of the best paragraphs in the whole book. I think that society as a whole should listen to that advice from Anton, because like you kind of touched on it with what you were talking about with work. We're so focused on these external things that we're trying to fill our purpose. We don't realize that our purpose is right in front of us, and it's relatively simple. If you're a man, find a woman, love her, make babies with her, raise those children with her. Extend yourself onto the next generation and help that generation become just a little bit better than you were.
Yep. And I think Petra kind of gets it, but I think this is that pivotal moment where he starts realizing that maybe he is wrong. And he says, well, maybe we can have children, but we're going to do it a specific way. And that's what is it? In vitro and fertilization, right? Where they have the embryos and they pick and choose which ones so they can separate the ones with Anton's key turned because they don't know which ones. And before I get to Valescu, the creator of Bean, Petra actually confronts Bean on this whole thing and straight up calls out his self-delusions. Because that's what he's done. He's deluded himself into thinking he's not human. He's deluded himself into thinking that he doesn't love others, that others can't love him. Does he eventually accept that he does care for others?
I think so. And you just hit on a point there when you talked about he's open to the possibility that he's wrong. Like in that moment, he opens his mind to the possibility that he's wrong. And you mentioned earlier about how Bean is smarter than Peter. And what makes Bean smarter than Peter? Not the fact that he may know more or he's highly intelligent, but the fact that he is open to the possibility of being wrong, where Peter really isn't open to the possibility of being wrong, or at least not yet. That again, we mentioned it earlier with his parents. His parents, I think, cut through that in this book, and I think we'll probably see Peter evolve to understand that. But that's what really makes you really smart, is the fact that you recognize that you don't know everything. And because he comes through that and Petra is pushing him there, I think this is the moment where he starts to accept, like, I am human. And, things aren't the way that I think they should be, but maybe I don't know everything.
Yeah, I really do think he starts compromising, even if he hasn't fully changed his mind on some of these things.
Mm-hmm.
I think some of it, like that self-delusions die hard comment by Petra, is absolutely true. Like you can realize something, you're self-deluding yourself, that you've convinced yourself of something that isn't true, but you can't stop believing it because it's effectively hardwired into your brain. It takes a very long time to unwire that.
Yeah.
But that brings us to Valescu, the man that created Bean. He's free. He was let go because what crime did he commit? Destroying evidence. He didn't destroy 20 babies or anything like that. Totally didn't happen. But he was freed. It's not said directly, but it was essentially a shield that did it. I believe it was through the emails that we kind of get this information. That Valescu was freed by a shield and was actually getting paid by a shield to continue conducting some of these illegal work behind the scenes in a very gray field, which is helping people give birth now that you can have more than 2 children per family in this future. And I don't know, I found that particular chapter to be interesting, with Petra realizing before Bean that something was up, that Valescu may not actually have a way to verify which embryo has Anton's key turned or not.
She doesn't say anything to Bean, though. Not in that moment, at least.
No, she doesn't, because she doesn't actually know, and she can't know until later.
And she's hesitant to tell Bean because she already knows he's in this self-delusion, and this may be something that turns him back and say, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't do it. So she keeps it to herself because she's like, I think this is the best decision for both me and Bean. And I think it's it's kind of lovely in a way because, when you find a partner, you find somebody that you love, you hope that that person helps you grow and balance yourself. And as we talked about, while Bean is very confident in his intelligence and his ability to solve problems and protect himself, he is not confident in his ability to be a human being and to love others. He thinks that there's something wrong with him. But he just loves differently. And there's value in that.
You say that, but one of the lines that Bean calls out, it's earlier in the book, it's like, I've started 2 wars, wrote an epic poem, did some other things, and I haven't accomplished anything yet. It's like, bruh.
Well, I mean, I think that when you think that you're not human and there's something horribly wrong with you, I mean, just think about it. Like, when you hate yourself, it's hard to love others. And Bean is trying to do the best he can and help others, but he hates himself, so he can't let himself know that he loves others. But he does. He does love. It's back to that vulnerability thing, right? Ashiel refuses to be vulnerable. Bean just doesn't understand what it is to be vulnerable. And through this process, this relationship with Petra, he learns that. I think, if we can take anything away from this is like the stereotypical man and the stereotypical woman getting together. And the woman expands the man's horizon to be a little bit more vulnerable, which lets that man be more of himself and grow and be a better and stronger leader. As opposed to Ashiel, who just kills everybody around him, who even sees him vulnerable. Bean is willing to be vulnerable and grow, and Ashiel is this dominating force that just won't allow it.
Yeah. And this brings up the next question. Who really understands Ashiel the most? At this point, at least. Bean, Petra, both of them? Like, who actually understands Ashiel the most here?
I mean, it's Bean, because they had a similar upbringing. And there's this great moment, I think this is probably where you're going with this, is where he reflects on Ashiel. And he almost feels bad for, he does feel bad for Ashiel. I can't remember the exact, words that he used, but he's reflecting on his life and thinking like, he really didn't have much of a choice. He had to survive, and this is the way that he survived.
Yeah, I think that I could be wrong on this.
Petra I think Petra is instrumental in this too. I think because she's the one that gets Bean to reflect on what Bean knows about it. So
because they go throughout Rotterdam and Bean was avoiding where he grew up, and
right.
Petra forces him to go there. And so they end up talking about it because Petra wants her children to know where Bean came from, even
yeah.
if Bean thinks it's unimportant.
Right.
And there's a quote from this that I really thought was interesting. And if I ask myself this question, who really understands Ashiel the most, at least at this point, it's actually Petra. Because, well, she spent quite a bit of time with him, a lot more than Bean did. And they're looking at the river, at the port where Poke died. And Petra says, he gave her body to the river, didn't he? And Bean's like, no, that's not how it was. It's like, but in Shiel's mind, he gave her back to the universe after helping him or whatever, right? It's that contorted way of thinking. Petra understands that. Bean just sees it for the objective reality that it is. There's nothing more to see here. I don't know.
I see, and I'm not 100% that Petra's right on this either. Right? Like, I understand Petra's perspective, and I think Petra's perspective is an option, but I don't think we really know if that's how Ashiel saw it or not. But the fact that it is a perspective and it's possible opens Bean's eyes, I think.
I don't think this will be settled between us. So, folks listening and or watching, comment in the comment section what you think. Who really understands Ashiel better? Bean, Petra, combination of both? Or are they both wrong and you're right? Let us know in the comments.
Why can't they both be right and both be wrong?
Because the world is black and white, Jeff. I read a book, see? White, black. There's no gray. Anyway. Valescu, he betrays them. But he doesn't betray them directly. The security guard was paid off by Valescu on behalf of Ashiel. And they abscond with the embryos, the ones that weren't implanted in Petra. But there's more to it. The taxi cabs to take them from Valescu to the airport, wherever they were going, right? Those were also commandeered by this whole scheme that Ashiel set up to steal Bean and Petra and the embryos and basically win whatever Ashiel was after, right? Bean, on a random happenstance, says, no, Petra, you get in the third taxi, screw this line system, those other two guys can get over it. What he doesn't know is that actually saves Petra. Bean gets in the first taxi and is almost assassinated before being rescued by the same people that capture Petra. Who helps them out here?
I don't remember, actually. I'm sorry.
A lie.
Yeah.
So earlier in the book, Petra and Bean meet with, I think his name's Ambul, from Bean's Army and Battle School. And he has a connection to a lie who we haven't heard about since he was freed from Russia. Where has he gone? Well, turns out he's been chosen as Caliph as part of the new Muslim Caliphate, the Islamic Caliphate. And he ends up rescuing Bean and Petra after they reached out first. But they don't know this. They don't know this until like a day later when they all get there. And Petra's freaking out, and Bean is calming her down. And Eli is just almost kind of like this magical character in a way. He seems to be wise and old, even though he's the same age that Petra is, like realistically. And when I first read this book, I did not see that coming. That being how they reconvene with Eli, or that Eli changed that much in what, a year and a half, 2 years.
So that that part I kind of forgot because Eli is Caliph, right? So like the name changes. It kind of, in my brain, maybe didn't connect immediately when we were talking about it. But I think, and this is one of the great things about the series as a whole is Orson Scott Card clearly has a very in-depth knowledge of history. And when you get to this part with Khalif, we're talking about war between India and China and Russia and all these different things. And I find all this stuff very interesting. And there's constant reminders that self-government is kind of like the best way to do it. There's a great scene. Oh man, I gotta find it real quick, with Petra talking about this. Hold on. My own ends, she thought, are to give them gifts they need, wise governments, or at least self-government. And then she laughed at herself because the two were usually opposites. Even in an Indian-ruled Indians, it was not self-government, where the ruler self-governed the people and the people governed the ruler. It was mutual government. That's the best that could be aspired to. And, this, again, kind of ties back to that we don't know everything. It's really hard to put all that power into one group or person to rule you, because while it might be wise for a time, how could they possibly know what's best for everybody? And when you're dealing with a large body of people making decisions, you're bound to get some unwise decisions to be made. But it's really the best you could hope for, because there really is no better solution when you're dealing with imperfect people on Earth.
A diverse and imperfect people.
Yeah.
The Indian subcontinent is super diverse. It's wild that it's a cohesive country, if you ask me.
It's actually, that's one of the things I've been reading about. It's impressive, like how diverse and separated yet conjoined they are. It really is very impressive.
Yep. Don't want to be the president of India, I can assure you of that. But kind of in that same vein, right? We get information from Malai, and this is from the Middle Eastern perspective, from the Islamic perspective, where I kind of see him as the second wise man of the book, where Anton's the first wise man, Malai's kind of the second, and I would say like Peter's parents are the third quote unquote wise man in a way, just being those guiding beacons to help us understand the perspective of the characters and the reality that they're in. Because we get this information from Malai. There was the third, fourth, and I think there was a fifth world war, right? And two of them were essentially jihads, where the Muslims were waging war, probably from reasons that started in about 2000, give or take, maybe 20 years before that. But you see where this is going. And he talks about how Islam kind of buried that hatchet, and they don't fight anyone anymore. They're friends with Israel, with the Jews. They're friends with Christians. They've opened up to a more progressive branch when it comes to like women's rights, things like that. But they also, I'm not going to say they'll hold a grudge, but they understand that the West isn't perfect either. Mm-hmm. And there's, it's on page 218 for me, and they're talking about like the holy wars and who can stand against China. Who else but you can stand against China? The Europeans, the North Americans. It's hard to stand when you have no spine. Mm-hmm. They're an old civilization. They're a tired civilization. We were once too. It took centuries of decline and a series of bitter defeats and humiliations before we made the changes that would allow us to serve Allah in unity and hope. And when you first think about it, it's like, well, that's kind of like a coping mechanism in a way. But at the same time, if you think about history, think about all the civilizations that came and went. Like the Roman civilization came and went. Italy right now is just kind of an old, tired group of people. They're just doing their thing now.
The Ottoman Empire, right? Which, the Ottomans thought they were the new Romans. Like they conquered Constantinople. They believed that they were the extension of the Roman Empire. And, after World War II, they kind of ceased. Am I right with that? Or is it
World War I?
World War
I.
One, sorry.
Ceased to exist after World War I.
Yeah, they ceased to exist after World War I. And, it is, again, it's a testament to the depth of knowledge that Card has when he writes about these things. And he's able to bring to life his characters through this deep understanding of human history and how we fight amongst ourselves and try to conquer each other and divide each other for our own personal gain.
Yeah. And when we lose, how we cope with it or how we bounce back from it,
Right.
in a way. And the question that I have here, Jeff, is really, is this future realistic? Like the stuff going on in this series after the Formic invasion, all of the Earth is united against this foreign entity from another solar system, from another planet. And now we've got all these people that are geniuses that we know are geniuses. Some of them are allied to nations, some of them aren't. And we still have nationalities, we still have civilizations that haven't always agreed with each other. Is this a feasible way things could happen?
Are you talking about in the series or in real life?
In real life. Like 100, 200 years from now, is this a possibility?
What I'll say is anything's a possibility.
Non-answer, rejected.
I would say that it is not a probability. I mean, especially where we sit today, because I think that we've had a generation of people that have not been guided the way that they needed to be guided. They haven't been raised. They've been kind of ignored. They've been allowed to dictate their own ends. And I think that that's a dangerous way to live. We should have been sharing the information, reflecting on our failures like they are talking about in this book, and then trying to grow and be better. In a lot of ways, we were kind of shunning those failures, refusing to be vulnerable, and not really learning anything. Having said all that, I absolutely think that we could get there. But the thing that happens in the series that I don't want to happen in real life is this unifying external force that forces everybody together. Because that's dangerous, and that means that a whole bunch of people will die, and I don't want that to happen. And it also means that there'd be some sort of alien invasion, because that's really the only external force that could unite the world, and I don't want that to happen either. All those things scare me.
I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be an alien invasion. It could be an existential threat to Earth, like an asteroid that would wipe out all of life. Okay, how can we build something to deflect it, right?
That also frightens me. All these things frighten me, Craig. And I don't want them to happen. And I don't want them to be part of a plan to unite us. I want us to be civilized and reflective enough to unite under the guise that it will make all of us better. We will all be able to grow. We wouldn't have to worry about an alien invasion or an asteroid hitting us. As if we actually work together, we'd probably solve these problems before they ever got to our doorstep. But we are so flawed as human beings, we constantly push off the problems of tomorrow until they become problems of today, and then we rally together and, pick up the pieces. But that's an exhausting way to live.
Well, and that's assuming that the essay I wrote on this, I'm not sure if I published it on my Substack yet or not. It's on the to publish list if not. It's essentially saying we look to a higher power to solve our problems a lot of times. And that could be society, that could be God or religion, or it could be something that is much smarter than us, such as AI, or artificial superintelligence, realistically. And I may or may not have written 2 books about like how we go, oh, humans are the problem with government. Here's a artificial superintelligence that'll totally not be bad at all.
But here's the thing: artificial intelligence isn't really intelligence.
But
it's
it
just
can solve problems.
Right. It
And
can
because
solve problems.
it can, we'll go to it instead of thinking about it ourselves. And over time, we'll just get atrophied and lazy and not actually think, because artificial intelligence will think for us, even though it just regurgitates the same information.
And then we might think that we know everything, like Peter. Because, like I mentioned before, Peter's father is really just enabling him. instead of challenging him. And the reason that Peter's father isn't enabling him is because I think Peter's father understands he doesn't have the relationship with his son that he needs to be able to challenge him. He probably assumes that if he challenges him, Peter's just going to snap back and go the opposite direction. So he makes a conscious choice to do it, and then I think what he does is he picks his moment to challenge him, and he picks the right moment, and that's that's a turning point, like I said, in Peter's life, I think, and I think we're going to see Peter's growth. But I think that's what happens with people.
Yeah. I will say, it's clear you haven't worked for a very large company like I have.
Well, obviously,
Because, like, you always have those big vision thinkers that rise to the top because they understand enough to get there. But then you are asked to go do something on behalf of that person, and it's very ambiguous about what they really want. You have to read between the lines. And that's how most of big companies actually move forward. It's when there's a disconnect in that ideology or that vision that you have that separation. But to your point, Jean Paul isn't helping Peter understand that. You have to have the shared vision. No one else in the hegemony or on Earth really cares about what Peter wants. They're just there because like the hegemony was already there, and Peter's just trying to take it for his own reasons. But he's not socializing with the little people, with the average common working man that works for him. He's just saying, "Hey, go do things." And this is something Achille actually does, and Jean Paul like calls him out on it with Peter. It's like Achille talks to the average person. He doesn't give them flack. You're like, why can't the code be good enough for the keylogger? And Achille's like, hey, you're doing the best you can. And actually communicating, right? Which is part of that weird charm that Achille has. But we haven't talked very much about Peter. We've been talking a lot about Bean and Petra. So let's roll that tape back, and we get a little bit about how Peter wields the little bit of power the hegemony still has throughout this book. It's mostly about Peter and his relationship to those around him, but the power that he does have, it's mostly in like international debts and influence without any real authority.
soft power.
Soft power. But does that mean the hegemony is really neutered as it comes to Earth politics?
No. And I think it's clear when he visits the space station and he's up there writing and he's using his soft power, and they're like, you're having an effect. Like you are making a difference.
Disgraced in an exile, he's
Yes.
having an effect.
Right. But I mean, and again, back to Peter, he, in this moment of disgrace, he almost shuts down. He's a little child crying in his bedroom, essentially, and his mom and dad have to drag him out of bed. It is something that Peter, I don't think, had ever dealt with in his life. He has been exceptionally smart and exceptionally resourceful, whether it be out of spite or whatever, ego, whatever it is. But that moment that he got punched in the face, he didn't want to get back up. And that's really the difference between Peter and Ender, right? Is Ender always got back up. He didn't go crying to mommy and daddy. He just kept on. And I think
solved
that
the problem.
he solved the problem. And I think the difference here is Ender had a different relationship with his father and mother than Peter does. And I think John Paul recognizes that, and so does Teresa. And they both recognize, I mean, as a father, as somebody that has 5 kids, I can tell you I feel bad. And as a firstborn son, I can tell you the firstborns are the test subjects, like for parents and for kids, right? Like I know that my brother was raised differently than me. And I reflect back on that now after raising my kids, and I realize he was raised differently because my parents realized they made mistakes with me and they were just trying to do better. And I could be mad at them for that, or I could just recognize that that's life, right? And I did the same thing with my kids, right? I did things with my firstborn and thought, well, maybe I won't do that the next time because it had a negative effect on the kid. And I try to help that kid. And I think that's what John Paul and Teresa are doing here. They're trying to help their son because they recognize they weren't perfect parents.
Yeah. Well, you can only be so much of a parent some of it's like, Peter, you really don't believe you can control a shield, do you? Like, really? Everyone else tried and they failed. What makes you think you can do better? And they turn out to be right. Bean and Petra turn out to be right. Verlomi is someone that also had to leave the Hegemon compound in Ribeirão Preto, I think is where it's at. She was another Bao School graduate. She was mentioned in the previous book. She actually has I'd say a minor role in this book, but a fairly significant role in the upcoming war between the Caliphate and China. But she ends up going back to India. So Ashiel going to the Hegemon is actually kind of a blessing in disguise because it allows Bean to open up. It allows Verlomi to go back to India and help set up a resistance that helps India become free from China eventually. And it also helps Peter grow and learn what it's like to fail and that it's okay and that people aren't super upset about the fact that you failed. But now what are you going to do about it? Are you going to lay in bed and say crude things to your parents until your father throws water on your face? True story. It happened. And it was funny. I laughed every single time I laugh at that scene.
I thought that was a great scene.
And Peter gives a press conference shortly after that, if I remember correctly. It was that morning. He didn't want to get out of bed and go speak to the world. And his parents are like, listen, you're getting out of bed and you're going out there. If we're going with you, you're resigning. If we're not going with you, you better like wow the world and next step us into defeating Ashiel. And he goes out and he does it. And he thinks he did okay. His parents were like, yeah, we kind of skimmed it. Pretty sure he did okay. Turns out he did a really good job.
Right.
And he got all the press coverage. Ashiel did it's like the State of the Union in America. And then there's the response to the State of the Union. Everyone watches one. They don't watch the other. Especially if it's going on at the same time. And so Ashiel does that as well. And it's like, okay, who's the real hegemon? Well, the IF fleet is like, no, it's definitely Peter. We're listening to Peter, and we have all the power. So it's Peter.
Well, and this is that oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to send us to the next thing, but
so this is the moment that they are challenging Peter, and they are loving Peter, right? Because in this moment, they're like, look, cry about it if you want, or you can go out there and be the person that you are. You are extremely intelligent. You do have this power. Now go use it. You're not going to be perfect all the time, and it's okay. Nobody expects you to be perfect all the time, but you should just keep going. You should try this. And, back to Peter and Ashiel, this idea that Peter has that he wants to control Ashiel, this doesn't recognize Peter's power. Because we've mentioned it over and over again, it's influence, it's his writing, it's his ability to share insight with the world and have them want to follow him. That's not control. It's not control when you're inspiring people to follow your path. It's control when you're trying to force. Can you control Ashiel? No, because Ashiel doesn't want to be controlled. He's not going to let you control him. And it's poor on Peter, it's ego on Peter's behalf to believe that he can do this because he is this intelligent man who can influence the world in such a way. He does have this delusion, if you will, that he can control Peter, and his parents...
Ashiel.
I'm sorry, Ashiel. Yeah, and his parents are there for him in that moment of need, in that moment that he needs to be challenged and he needs to be pushed and he needs to be loved. He doesn't think much of his parents, as you mentioned before, but he realizes that his parents are actually quite exceptional as well. And that maybe he's exceptional because they are exceptional, not despite the fact that they are exceptional.
You don't have 3 super intelligent children without being exceptional yourself. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, but the dice are loaded in that case. So the thing is, how do you control Ashiel when his entire plan involves being captured by Peter and playing a good controlled personal assistant, effectively. What is he, the personal assistant or the assistant to the hegemon, right? And all he does is do precisely what Peter wants him to, and he talks with people, but he has that influence still. He has a network, and he uses this to get Valescu freed. Some of it's indirect and just opportune, right? Comes down to Ashiel's plan was to not have a plan and to not actually do anything until someone else acted, and then seize on that. And it's when Peter and Bean, actually, now I can't remember. What triggered Ashield's takeover?
I mean, he was secretly communicating, and because the Peter was not, or so Peter's group was spying, but then there was another group that was spying, and their spyware canceled each other out.
So before that, right? Peter is at the compound, and then he has to flee because Ashiel takes over, and that's when he goes to battle school, to the battle school station. Is it the war that triggers that? Why are we blinking on this?
All right, well, go back and find it, and then cut it into the webisode. Be like, Jeff and Craig forgot.
It has something to do with the war that's going out in China, and China like disavows Ashiel, and Peter has to flee, and Peter ends up in battle school, right? There's a whole series of events that happens that clearly both of us are blanking on because it wasn't important to us. Ashiel nominates Surial Wong as essentially the hegemon, but Surial Wong has been playing Ashiel the entire time and has basically been subservient to him. So Ashiel doesn't actually change his role. He's still the assistant to the hegemon, but all the people in the know understand Surial Wong isn't the person in power. Ashiel is. And the IF knows this as well. And Ashiel still has that network, right? Peter goes up to battle school. He gets to see Wereender and all these other battle school brats lived. And they realize there's a leak on the space station. Not an air leak, although that would be pretty scary too, but a leak in security. Someone knows, and it told Ashiel or someone down on Earth that Peter was there, even though they did it all under secrecy. And there's a whole chain of events where we get a lot of insight in the family dynamics, particularly between Jean-Paul and Teresa, on how they go about solving problems. And that's what it was. Bean sends emails to Peter's parents to tell him, hey, this thing's going to happen. Ashiel's going to take over, and they get ahead of it. And that's how they stay away while Ashiel takes over. That's what it was. And they end up putting it together, and we get a really interesting dynamic between those two. They're married, so it has to be interesting, right?
Those two are very interesting, by the way. And not anything like what I expected them to be, because up until this book, we know very little about them other than what the children say about them, which is again incredibly insightful by Card, right? Because children very often, especially at a young age, don't really know their parents. They just think they know their parents.
Yep. So Peter's up in the battle school station, and they meet with some folks. Graf is there. He goes back down to Earth, so on and so forth. There's not too much I actually bookmarked here. The parts that I found interesting was right before they go back down to Earth, and it touches on that spyware where Graf has his own people doing spyware and key logging to see who's leaking information. And Jean-Paul gets the great idea to go do the same thing, and they end up canceling each other's information out. And this happens down at Ribeirão Pré 2 as well. And it's like Jean-Paul trying to get ahead of it and solving things in the background, and Peter and Graf are trying to solve it on their own, and it causes some conflict there. But Peter comes up with a pretty brilliant idea, a really good strategy to get the leaker to show themselves. And Jean-Paul figures it out. Teresa doesn't. And they're going to fake going back to Earth, see who sends the message, and then whoever sends the message is clearly the leak. But how they go about this is hilarious. What does Peter do? He says, he talks to everyone, I need this, I need this, I need you to do this before 1800. It's like, okay, so you're going back down to Earth and you need it by then. Okay. But it's also a secret. No one's supposed to know he's supposed to go down there. And Teresa's like, what are you doing? And it's not until they actually get to the very last moment where they don't actually get in the shuttle and it bumps off a little bit into space before it reconnects. It's like they set it all up and they told everyone besides the chief of security. Everyone besides that man, who also happens to be the person that Bean stole the password information from the very first book. Fun callback. So they end up capturing the mole on the space station by doing this. And it's the chief of security, like I said. But what is his loyalty? And is his loyalty actually in the right place? Do you remember what he was doing this on behalf of? So they end up capturing that mole, right? And it's the chief of security. What is his loyalty? Like, is his loyalty actually in the right place?
Isn't his loyalty to himself?
No, his loyalty was to his family.
Okay. Yes, and he actually shows forgiveness in this moment too, right? Because he recognizes that he is being loyal to something, right? Ashiel has threatened his family. He doesn't really know what else to do, and so he is carrying this out. And because of this, instead of prosecuting and executing this guy, they basically just let him go and let him go back to his family. That was actually a really good part of the book that I totally forgot. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, so when they realize it's the chief of security, because it's the only person they didn't tell. So if a message got sent from the console that the man was working on, clearly he was the one that was leaking the information, which turns out to be true. Graf says, no harm. We haven't sent any information out. Nothing has went to Earth. How do we fix this? And both Graf and Peter, to your point, are like, we're not mad at you per se, because we know Ashiel got under your skin somehow, and it was threatening your family. And if your higher loyalties to your family and to your country, you don't belong in the international fleet. Our higher loyalty is to the international fleet here. Nothing against you. You're going home. Deal? Okay, now, how do we fix it? I found that to be an interesting, probably the most interesting part of the battle school scenes, because it shows wisdom and generosity from Graf and from Peter. And it also shows that recognizing someone's loyalties goes a long way in understanding where they're coming from, and that they may not be coming from a bad place. It's just a different place. Some people have families, some people don't. Peter and Graf don't necessarily have a family on Earth that Ashiel can threaten, but they understand that.
Let's get to the end here with Bean and Petra and Ashiel and Suriawong. You should hear what I call. Look, it makes my phone light up every time I say Suriawong because it hears Siri. Bean starts to reflect on like what he can do, and he starts to think about Ender and what made Ender successful. What was Ender's focus? Ender's focus, he had a large focus, but one of the points was you have to know thy enemy, right? You have to understand who you're going against. And he starts to think about and understand Ashiel. Back to the question that you asked earlier, who understands Ashiel better than anybody? I think it's Bean. And I think it plays out here in the last scene, or in the last encounter where he throws everything out the window and he goes, he points out what you just said earlier about Ashiel. Ashiel doesn't really have a plan. He's just doing what you don't think he's going to do. And he's building relationships to have people have his back in those moments. But in that moment, Bean didn't have a plan.
But Ashiel did.
And Ashiel did. And Ashiel's plan doesn't come to fruition because he didn't build the relationships he thinks he built. He was tricked. Suryawong was playing him. So when it came to the moment where Suryawong and his men were supposed to support Bean, they turned their back on him. And
Ashiel.
Ashiel.
Support Ashiel. They turned their back on him towards Bean and Peter. Yeah.
Right. And now it's just, and in this moment, Ashiel is throwing his embryos at Bean, and he's expecting Bean to, grab them and treasure them and save them. But Bean's just like, lets him hit to the ground, lets it go. And then he steps forward. And I did not think this was going to happen. I did not expect this to happen. It was almost anticlimactic at a point because I just thought that somehow Ashiel was going to get away. I always thought Ashiel was going to get away, but he doesn't. Bean finally takes care of him. This must have been such a relief for Bean and Petra because they're pregnant, they're married, they're looking at life differently. They're trying to grow their family and refocus and repurpose their life. And now they're almost free to do so because Bean kills Ashiel. I gotta say, I even felt bad. Like after reflecting on Ashiel's life and who he was, I still felt bad for Ashiel in that moment, dying, never being able to have somebody to challenge him, to repurpose him, to refocus him in a different direction, like all the other characters had. Because if we say, back to the difference, what's the difference between Peter and Ashiel? Well, Peter has family that loves him, whether he recognizes it or not, and Ashiel doesn't. What's the difference between Bean and Ashiel? Bean had family. He had Poke, he had Sister Carlotta, he had Petra, he had Ender. He had people that believed in him, that made him think that he can grow and be something different, and that is not something, at least that I understand, that Ashiel ever had in the story that we've gotten in these 3 books.
He didn't get any of that. The last paragraph. Then he slumped over and sprawled out on the floor, dead. It didn't bring back Poke, or Sister Carlotta, or any of the other people he had killed. It didn't change the nations of the world back to the way they were before Ashiel started making them his building blocks, to break apart and put together however he wanted. It didn't end the wars Ashiel had started. It didn't make Bean feel any better. There was no joy in vengeance, and precious little in justice either. But there was this. Ashiel would never kill again.
That's so great. I'm ready to cry right now. There is
no
no
joy. I was trying to bite that back.
There is no joy in vengeance. I mean, I think again, I love Card's writing and the depths which he explores our humanity in these books is just really, really awesome. And it's such a fitting way to end the book.
Yep.
And Ashiel's story too, because that's his story is over. I assume he's not mentioned. Maybe there's a flashback in another book at some point. Maybe Ashiel's brought back, but I imagine he's not really part of any of the future books.
No comment.
All right. Well, no comment.
Mostly because I don't remember off the top of my head.
Fair.
We kind of touched on this earlier, but I'm going to ask a question again. Does Orson Scott Card do a good job of encapsulating a potential future and how each civilization or culture might respond to events?
Yes.
Because he does?
Yes, I think he does. I think he very much does, and I think he very clearly plays this off of what's happened in the past.
Yeah. Well, and he uses the past to influence the decisions that might be a little bit different, like Islam invading East, which they didn't really do aside from the Indian subcontinent for most of their 1,000-year period, 1,500-year period, right? Between about 500 and, well, I guess 300 and 2,000, between Muhammad and the Ottomans. But they open up like a three-front war, which normally shouldn't go well, but it ends up going well because they planned it meticulously, and they planned it based on how China has historically went about their civilization. Like that's true now. That's going to be true 100 years from now, most likely, 200 years from now, most likely. And it's true here as well. And Hot Soup, we get some insight from Hot Soup, who is the character that was also part of Ender's Geesh, but has allied with China, and his frustration with the Chinese military and how they go about making decisions. And he's like, listen, you're going to screw up. And he just yells at them.
That was
and
a great scene,
he's like,
by the way.
it is a great scene. And it's like, he stopped caring. If he dies, he dies. But he knows he's right. He hopes he's wrong, but he knows he's right.
That goes back to this whole thing about power and what is real power and what is real leadership, and that ability to speak the difficult things to people that you care about and love, and for them to be able to hear you, right? Like that is what Peter's father does to him, and Peter hears him. That's what Hot Soup does, but China doesn't hear him, right? They don't want to listen to the difficult things. They don't want to hear that they're wrong or that they should think about things differently. And ultimately, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. If what you're doing isn't working, you probably should reflect and try to do something different. And if there's somebody that's in your circle that's challenging you to do so, that person should be moved to the top of your list, and you should reflect on what they're saying. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're right, but you should at least entertain the possibility that they might be right.
No, that can't possibly be correct, Jeff. The solution is that person needs to go through the assistants to the generals to determine whether or not it's useful information.
Bureaucracy.
Yes, precisely. See, you get it. There is a final chapter. It basically summarizes the events that happen. Like, here's how the war goes. This is where all these different people end up. There's conversation between Peter and his parents, Petra and Bean, in the aftermath. And then that's the end, right? The real ending was chapter 19.
Yeah.
But we do get that summary before the acknowledgments of all these things that take place that are important to know, especially going into the next book, Shadow of the Giant, which is going to be on our season 3 reading list because
Absolutely.
we're done with season 2.
That's right. This is the end of season 2. No, we should definitely do that. And I thought of something, if we can. We should read The White Castle. I think that it would open up a little bit into this Shadow Puppets world as well. I think it would be an interesting read to tag along in next season. We can obviously talk about what books we're going to do next season. But yeah, put that on the list.
Definitely writing it down. I've never heard of it.
So I, as part of my Shadow Puppets reading, I decided to study the Middle East. I read about the Ottomans. I read about, a whole bunch of stuff. And this book came up multiple times. And so I think it would just bring a little bit more depth. It's a novel. It's short. It's 176 pages from what I looked up. So I think it fits, what we're reading about. And I think that would be really good.
Okay. Well, we did pick out the first book already for season 3. So this is July. We're taking August off. And in September, we're reading this book here, Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. We haven't really read very much literature by Russians, and that is a disservice to Russia because they have a lot of excellent writers. So we decided we need to do a big book. What book can we do? Why not Crime and Punishment? Why not, punish ourselves with a big book, right?
I've been wanting to read this book, and it was a great idea because we're taking the month off, so we have 2 months to read this book. Typically, we try to do shorter ones since we do them every month. It's hard to get a big book like this done. So I'm really, really excited about it. It's been on my list for a long time.
Yep. It's been on mine too, but we had to align on a specific translation, and this will matter in how we discuss it. So the translation we have is the Oliver Reddy translation, which was 10 or 15 years ago. That is the one that we'll be reading. And once again, you got to make sure you get the right translation. Otherwise, things may be very different in how we talk about them.
So I did a little research on this, and from what I've read, this is the best translation. Now, we'd have to read this and all the other ones to really make a good judgment, but
Yeah.
this was trying to keep it as close to the original Russian as possible.
It tries to keep it close to the original Russian. It's not like a direct word for word translation, which the original one, which I have a copy of that. I think I might look at it side by side to see how it changes. The direct word for word translation doesn't carry that same spirit and humor that Dostoevsky writes in. There's some things, it's you see this in German as well. There are certain words, there's certain ideas that just don't translate from one language to another. And so you have to be fluent in that language to truly understand it. And the Oliver Reddy translation does a good job of translating that for us non-Russian speakers. Da?
Da.
Da. All right. We'll see everyone in September.
Peace and love. That was perfect. The cat says goodbye.
I'm leaving that in there.
Well, that's all we have for now, folks. Let us know in the comments what stuck out to you most. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
And for those tuning in on Spotify and Substack, please like and share.
For those on YouTube, kindly give us a thumbs up.
And you can check out the Substack version of this podcast for older episodes and future books we're looking at reading together. And you can find all links for What the Book at craigtstewart.com. With all that said, have a good one, folks.
Peace and love.